For years, one question hung over Iran like a shadow. What happens after Ali Khamenei? That question was supposed to belong to the future. It was supposed to be debated slowly, behind closed doors, in whispers among clerics, generals, and political insiders. Instead, it arrived in the middle of a war. And now the answer is one of the most consequential decisions Iran has made since 1989. Mojtaba Khamenei, the son of the late Ali Khamenei, has been named Iran's new supreme leader. That alone is historic. But what makes this moment far bigger than a succession story is the timing, the symbolism, and the message it sends. Iran did not choose a reformer. It did not choose a consensus figure meant to calm the region. It chose continuity under fire. And almost immediately, the new reality was met by two powerful responses. The Revolutionary Guard's publicly pledged obedience, and Israel reiterated that successors and those involved in their appointment could still be pursued. In other words, the office has been filled, but the danger around that office has not disappeared. To understand why this matters, start with the institution itself. In Iran's political system, the supreme leader is not just another head of state. This office sits above the elected branches and has final say over the military, the judiciary, and the strategic direction of the Islamic Republic. The supreme leader is commander-in-chief, ultimate referee, and ideological anchor all at once. Since the 1979 revolution, only two men had held that post before now, Ruhollah Khomeini and Ali Khamenei. So this is not a routine change. This is only the third time the office has changed hands since the revolution, and it comes during an active regional war. That makes the selection of Mojtaba more than a succession. It is an attempt to project control at a moment when Iran's leadership has been under direct military and political pressure. The Assembly of Experts, the constitutional body responsible for choosing the leader, is reported to have made the selection after days of tension, secrecy, and public speculation. However Iran presents the process, the outcome is clear. The state wanted to show that even after the death of Ali Khamenei, the top of the system could be reassembled quickly. And yet the choice of Mojtaba is anything but ordinary. Iran's ruling ideology has long rejected monarchy and hereditary rule. That is why this succession immediately triggered debate. Mojtaba is not just any cleric. He is the son of the previous supreme leader, and that makes this look, to many observers, like the closest thing the Islamic Republic has ever had to dynastic succession. That is precisely why the appointment carries so much meaning. In moments of crisis, systems often reveal what they value most. This choice suggests that in wartime, Iran's establishment valued loyalty, network strength, and security ties above the appearance of revolutionary purity. Mojtaba had long been considered a possible successor, but his rise always came with controversy because a father-to-son transfer cuts against the anti-monarchical identity the Islamic Republic has tried to maintain for decades. So the appointment solves one immediate problem, the vacancy at the top, while raising another, whether the system can justify this transition ideologically at home and politically abroad. That contradiction is part of the story now. Iran is trying to prove continuity, but the very form of that continuity may deepen arguments about what the regime has become. Who, then, is Mojtaba Khamenei? Publicly, he's often been described as a secretive or shadowy figure. He has never built the kind of public profile that usually comes with major government office, and AP notes that he had never been elected or appointed to a government position before becoming supreme leader. But lack of formal office is not the same as lack of power. For years, Mojtaba was widely seen as influential behind the scenes, working within his father's orbit and building ties with security institutions, especially the Revolutionary Guards. AP describes him as someone whose power rose alongside his father's, and notes that U.S. sanctions in 2019 accused him of helping advance his father's domestic and regional agenda. Reuters describes him as a mid-ranking cleric with close ties to the Guards, and as a longtime contender in the eyes of parts of Iran's ruling establishment. That combination matters. He is not entering as a charismatic outsider or compromise candidate. He is entering as someone whose authority is expected to rest less on public popularity and more on the security backbone of the state. In wartime, that may be exactly why he was chosen. That is where the Revolutionary Guards come in. When the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps publicly pledged complete obedience to Mojtaba Khamenei, that was more than ceremony. It was one of the first and most important signals of what this succession means in practice. In moments like this, the most important question is not only who has the title, but who recognizes it, who protects it, and who acts in its name. The Guards are central to Iran's military posture, its regional strategy, and its internal security. Their immediate support suggested that the new leader would not begin from a position of isolation. Instead, he would begin with the backing of the state's most powerful coercive institution. That does not erase internal disagreement, and it does not guarantee long-term stability. But it does tell us something essential. The security establishment moved quickly to close ranks. When a country is under military pressure, symbolism and cohesion matter. Iran's message was that the command structure at the top remains intact. In a crisis, that can be just as important as any battlefield development because it tells allies, enemies, and the domestic audience that the system can still produce a center of gravity. But the appointment did not happen in a vacuum. It happened in the middle of a war that has already reshaped the region. Reports from March 8th and March 9th show a conflict still expanding. Missile salvos into Israel, strikes across Iran, attacks affecting Gulf states, pressure on shipping and energy markets, and fresh concerns about civilians and regional escalation. On the day surrounding Mojtaba's appointment, the Times of Israel live blog reported 9 salvos fired at Israel from Iran on Sunday, while AP reported that the war had pushed oil prices above $100 a barrel and shaken energy markets. This is important because leadership transitions are usually judged over months or years. Mojtaba's will be judged almost immediately by how Iran performs and responds under wartime pressure. There's very little honeymoon period in a moment like this. Every speech, every military order, every signal to the Revolutionary Guards, and every diplomatic message will be read as evidence of what kind of leader he intends to be. In normal times, a new leader might first define himself domestically. In these conditions, the outside world may shape his first chapter before he has fully shaped it himself. The second powerful response came from Israel. Before and during the succession process, Israeli messaging was unusually explicit. Reuters and the Times of Israel reported that the IDF's Persian language account warned that the hand of the State of Israel would continue to pursue every successor and even those involved in appointing one. Earlier reporting also cited Israeli warnings that the next leader could be considered a target for elimination. This matters not just because it is dramatic language, but because it reframes the succession itself as part of the conflict. Normally, the appointment of a supreme leader would be treated as an internal constitutional matter with foreign consequences. Here, the succession process itself was publicly folded into the battlefield narrative. That means Mojtaba is taking office under the shadow of a threat, aimed not only at policy, but at the office holder and the selection mechanism. Whether that threat is acted upon is a separate question. But as a political signal, it is unmistakable. Israel wanted to show that replacing the man at the top would not, by itself, reset the strategic equation. The office has changed hands. The pressure, according to Israel's own message, has not. This is also why the title of new supreme leader may sound more stable than the reality underneath it. The position carries immense constitutional and military authority, but authority on paper and authority in a live crisis are not always the same. Mojtaba inherits a system under strain: war abroad, pressure on infrastructure, international scrutiny, volatility in oil markets, and visible concern among outside powers about escalation. He also inherits the symbolism of his father's death and the expectation inside parts of the regime that he must project resolve, not uncertainty. That is a difficult combination. Leaders who rise during crisis often feel pressure to prove they are not transitional, weak, or dependent. When that leader is also the son of the man he replaces, the pressure can be even greater because every move is judged through the lens of legitimacy. Is he leading in his own right, or only carrying forward a network built by his father? Is he an independent strategist, or the formal face of a system whose hard power lies elsewhere? These questions may not be answered immediately, but they will define how his rule is interpreted from the start. There is also a deeper political story here about how regimes survive shocks. Systems built around one dominant figure often look stable until the moment that figure is gone. Then the real test begins. Can the institutions outlive the person? Iran's answer, at least for now, is to say yes. The Assembly of Experts acted. The guards lined up behind the new leader. State media announced the transition, but a rapid display of continuity is not the same thing as a settled consensus. AP reported visible criticism inside Iran over hereditary succession. Other reporting has highlighted debate over procedure, legitimacy, and the influence of the guards. So what we may be watching is not a fully resolved transition, but an emergency consolidation that is still significant. It means the state's inner core remained functional enough to fill the office, but it also means Mojtaba's first challenge is larger than inheriting power. He must convert a wartime succession into durable authority. Those are not the same thing. One can be arranged quickly. The other has to be built, defended, and recognized over time. For the wider region, this appointment sends 2 messages at once. The first is continuity. Iran did not use this moment to signal moderation, bargaining, or ideological reset. It chose a figure associated with the existing power structure and close to the Revolutionary Guards. The second message is uncertainty. Because Mojtaba is less publicly defined than his father, outside governments will spend the coming days and weeks trying to determine whether he is simply continuity in a new form, or whether he will govern with a different style, tempo, or level of risk tolerance. This is especially important for the Gulf, for Israel, and for Washington. Every one of them will be asking the same basic question: does a leader who comes to power through wartime pressure become more cautious because he knows what is at stake, Or more hardline because he needs to prove that the strike that killed his father did not break the system? That question does not yet have a clear answer. What is clear is that the appointment narrows the odds of any immediate soft turn. The early signals point toward endurance, discipline, and security-first continuity, not opening or retreat. And then there's the question of legitimacy inside Iran itself. A supreme leader in Iran is not meant to be just a political manager. The office carries religious authority as well as constitutional power. That is part of why Mojtaba's rise has been watched so closely. Analysts and reports have long noted that his public religious standing never matched the stature of a traditional senior cleric in the way many outside observers expect from a supreme leader. Yet history also shows that in Iran, formal theology is only one part of the equation. Institutional alliances, elite trust, and security backing matter enormously. So the real legitimacy test for Mojtaba may not be whether everyone agrees with the symbolism of his appointment. It may be whether the system's main pillars treat him as the final decision-maker. The initial signs from the Guards suggest they are prepared to do exactly that, but legitimacy is layered. There is institutional legitimacy, ideological legitimacy, and public legitimacy. A leader can have one and still struggle with another. The story of Mojtaba Khamenei's rule may depend on whether those layers converge or drift apart under the pressure of war. This is why the phrase succession crisis does not fully capture what is happening. Yes, there was a crisis of succession after Ali Khamenei's death, but this is also a crisis of interpretation. What exactly has Iran just told the world? One reading is that the system is brittle and falling back on bloodline because it lacks better options. Another is that the system is adaptive and, under attack, has chosen the figure most likely to preserve chain of command. A third is that the Guards now matter more than ever, and Mojtaba's rise is inseparable from that shift. These interpretations are not mutually exclusive. In fact, they may all be partly true, and that is what makes this moment so important. Iran is not simply replacing one leader with another. It is revealing how power is organized when the state is under maximum pressure. The answer appears to be move fast, centralize, secure the military backing, and present a united front. Whether that formula holds over time is the next chapter. But as of now, the signal is unmistakable. Iran did not leave the office empty. It filled it with a figure deeply associated with continuity and internal control. At the same time, the outside pressure on that new order is already intense. President Trump publicly rejected the idea of Mojtaba as an acceptable successor before the official announcement, and Israeli messaging made clear that the succession would not shield the new leader from threat. Those statements matter because they mean Mojtaba begins his tenure with foreign adversaries, already defining him in hostile terms. That could reduce room for early de-escalation. It could also strengthen hardline instincts inside Iran, where outside pressure is often used to justify internal consolidation. In that sense, the appointment does not just change Iran, it changes the political grammar of the conflict. A son has replaced his father, a new supreme leader has been named. Yet the rhetoric around him suggests that, from the perspective of Iran's enemies, continuity at the top may justify continuity in pressure. The office has changed hands, but the strategic confrontation remains in place. So, if anyone was expecting the naming of a successor to calm this war automatically, the first signals point the other way. The transition may have stabilized the office. It has not stabilized the region. So where does that leave us? It leaves us at the start of a new and deeply uncertain phase. Mojtaba Khamenei has what matters most in the short term: the title, the institutional mechanism behind the title, and the visible backing of the Revolutionary Guards. But he also enters office with everything compressed. No gradual introduction. No long period of internal maneuvering in peacetime. No clean separation between leadership transition and regional conflict. His first chapter begins with war, with threats, with ideological controversy, and with a global audience trying to measure what his rise means for Iran's next move. That makes this one of those moments that looks simple in headline form and much more complicated in reality. Iran names new supreme leader. Sounds final. In truth, it is the beginning of a test of Iran's institutions, of Mojtaba's authority, of the Guards' cohesion, and of how far Israel and Iran are willing to push this confrontation now that succession has become part of the battlefield story. The name has been announced. The position has been filled.